you already know something is off. Not wrong in a way you can name yet, but off. The way a room feels different when furniture has been moved a few inches and nobody told you. You've been productive, technically, and it hasn't felt like what you were promised. Picture a Sunday evening. You've done everything right. The to-do list, the time blocks, the morning routine you read about in a book that sold 4 million copies. The tasks are checked. The day is spent. And somewhere between finishing and resting, there's this hollow space where satisfaction was supposed to be. You don't mention it to anyone. You open your phone instead. You tell yourself, tomorrow you'll do it better, plan it tighter, waste less. The internal voice says, you're just not disciplined enough yet. So you download another app. You redesign the system. You start again. That voice, the one that frames every unfinished task as a character flaw, didn't come from you. It was handed to you, carefully, over years. It arrived through self-help books written in a register that sounded like wisdom, but functioned like accusation. It came from hustle culture content that dressed anxiety up as ambition and called the resulting exhaustion a work ethic. It came from workplaces that measured your worth in deliverables, and from a school system that graded your capacity to sit still and produce on demand. Somewhere along the way, productivity stopped being a tool and became an identity. And identity is a much harder thing to put down at the end of the day. Here's the metaphor that keeps coming back to me. We were all handed the same hammer and told it was a complete toolkit. And we spent our 20s hammering at everything: relationships, creativity, rest, grief, confused about why some things kept breaking instead of getting built. The hammer isn't useless, but a hammer used where you need a compass will cost you more than no tool at all. Here's what most productivity advice actually taught you. It taught you that more output equals more worth. It taught you that friction is the enemy, that if something feels hard, the solution is a better system. It taught you that rest is a reward, earned at the end of a sufficient day, rather than a biological requirement that doesn't negotiate. And this is the quiet one, the one that does the most damage. It taught you that your feeling of resistance toward a task is evidence of your weakness, rather than information about your situation. What you've been treating as a verdict about yourself is almost certainly data about something else entirely. The productivity industry is worth over $80 billion globally. That number is worth sitting with for a moment, not because it's shocking, but because of what it implies. A problem that large, being addressed that actively, should be getting smaller. It isn't. Burnout rates have increased consistently across the past 2 decades. The people consuming the most productivity content are, on average, reporting the highest levels of overwhelm. Not because they're doing it wrong, because they're using a map that was drawn for a different terrain. There is a structural story underneath the personal one. The modern concept of productivity, output per unit of time, was formalized during the Industrial Revolution to measure machines. Literal machines. It was then applied to factory workers because the metaphor was convenient, not because it was accurate. And it has been traveling forward ever since, accruing moral weight it was never designed to carry, until it arrived in your 20s wearing the face of self-improvement. You didn't inherit a philosophy, you inherited a factory metric, and you've been trying to optimize a human life with it. A researcher named Aaron Reed at Boston University spent years studying high-performing employees at a consulting firm. She found that managers could not reliably distinguish between employees who actually worked 80 hours a week and those who just pretended to. The output was similar, the health outcomes were not. The people performing overwork were burning through resources they didn't have, for a result that was effectively identical. That finding doesn't just complicate hustle culture, it dismantles the premise. Working harder past a certain threshold stops producing more. It just produces more suffering with the same results attached. I want to be careful here, because I know what the objection forming in the back of your mind sounds like. It sounds like, but some people genuinely need to work more to get ahead, and dismissing that is a privilege. That's not wrong. There are real circumstances where grinding is not optional, where rest is a luxury that structural inequality has taken off the table. Acknowledging that the productivity myth is a myth doesn't erase the real constraints people face. What it does do is prevent you from adding a false layer of self-blame to circumstances that are already hard enough. The structural problem and the psychological wound are both real. They just need different tools. You clicked on this video for a reason, not because you're lazy. Lazy people don't spend their Sunday evenings searching for a better way to use their time. You clicked because something in the framing resonated, because some part of you has been quietly building a case against the system you've been running on, and you were looking for someone to say, "You're not wrong to be skeptical. You're not wrong to be tired. The fact that you're here is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of pattern recognition. You noticed. That matters." If you're finding this useful and you want more of these conversations, the kind that take ideas seriously without dressing them up as motivation, consider subscribing or joining the community below. It's a space for people who are done being managed by their to-do lists. So where does that leave you, practically? It leaves you with a different question. Not how do I become more productive, but what is productivity actually in service of right now? And is this system designed for the version of me that currently exists, or for a version I was told I should want to be? Those are not the same question. One leads to a better app. The other leads to a better life. The research on what actually sustains high performance over time, not sprints, not highlight reels, but sustained creative and cognitive output across years, points consistently toward recovery, autonomy, meaning, and connection. Not toward tighter schedules, not toward more aggressive time blocking, toward conditions where a human being can actually function. The metaphor of the hammer keeps returning, because here is what nobody told you when they handed it to you. The hammer was never the problem. Having only the hammer was. And the reason you only had the hammer is that the people who gave it to you only had the hammer. They weren't withholding the rest of the toolkit out of malice. They were passing forward the only thing they knew. Your parents optimized for stability because instability had cost them something real. Your managers optimized for output because their managers had done the same. The hustle content creators were, in many cases, genuinely trying to share something that had worked for them, without fully accounting for the specific conditions, the specific timing, the specific version of luck that made it work. The hammer was handed down in good faith. That doesn't make it the right tool for what you're trying to build. What you've been experiencing, the Sunday evening hollowness, the diminishing returns, the feeling of working hard and staying still, is not a malfunction. It is a calibration signal. It is the part of you that knows the difference between movement and progress, between activity and meaning, between a full calendar and a full life. That part of you has been trying to get your attention for a while. You've been calling it procrastination. You've been calling it laziness. You've been treating it like a symptom of something broken. What if it was actually the most functional thing about you? This is where the reframe becomes real rather than theoretical. The version of you that cannot sustain a 4-hour deep work block after 5 hours of sleep and 2 difficult conversations. That version of you is not failing. That version of you is accurately responding to reality. The version of you that keeps redesigning the system instead of finishing the project might be telling you something true about the project, not something shameful about your follow-through. The version of you that has been trying to optimize your way out of a feeling might at some point need to simply have the feeling. None of this means stop working. None of this means systems are useless. It means the system is supposed to serve the person, not the other way around. You came here carrying something, a specific weight, the quiet, grinding conviction that if you could just get the method right, the resistance would lift and the output would flow, and you would finally feel like the version of yourself you were supposed to be by now. That conviction is exhausting. It's also not based on evidence. It's based on a story that was given to you before you were old enough to question the premise. Everything you learned about productivity in your 20s was not wrong because it was stupid. It was wrong because it was incomplete. It handed you metrics without meaning, systems without self-knowledge, efficiency without any serious reckoning with what efficiency is actually for. It made output the goal and left the question of a good life conspicuously unaddressed, as though that part would take care of itself once the method was optimized. It won't. It never does. You are allowed to want more than a completed task list. You are allowed to measure your days by things that don't show up in a productivity app. You are allowed to be a person who works hard, seriously, with real commitment, and who also asks, regularly and without apology, whether the work is building something worth building. You are allowed to put the hammer down and look for the rest of the tools, not because you've earned the rest, because you were never only a hammer's work to begin with. If this landed somewhere real for you, subscribing takes 2 seconds and keeps these conversations coming. There's also a community linked below. People asking the same questions, building something more honest than a better morning routine.